I'm speaking in good faith today with Wendy Goldberg, who's the executive director of the Tri-Faith Initiative. This is an interfaith organization that has put together and built a neighborhood where there is a mosque, a synagogue, a church, and an interfaith center, all collected together in Omaha, Nebraska. Wendy, thank you for speaking with me today.
Thank you for having me.
And I want to say that again. Here in close proximity, you have a mosque, a synagogue, a church, and interfaith center. That doesn't happen by accident.
That's correct. It's 20 years in the making, and it's an experiment in proximity. It's also an experiment in fostering trust and deep relationship. So I'll tell you how we got started. In responding to 9/11, some members of the Jewish community from this congregation, which is a Reform Jewish congregation, Temple Israel. This congregation of Temple Israel was established in 1871. We have a deep history in Omaha, and we know that our founders were in relationship with Standing Bear. So being in relationship with the religious other is culturally normative for us, right? In addition, following 9/11, some members of our synagogue went to a local mosque to stand in solidarity with our Muslim brothers and sisters to say, no harm should come to you on this moment, that other people using similar vocabulary in different ways should be associated with you in any way. And out of that grew relationship and picnics and potlucks. And then when Temple Israel was looking to move west in Omaha towards where the growth of Omaha had been established and many of our members had moved, we were looking to acquire a piece of land and decided, what if we knew who our neighbors would be? We could acquire a parcels that were being sold in larger quantities than we could use for our own purpose. And we went to some of these friends we had made in the Muslim community and said, we know you're thinking about creating a mosque to meet the needs of your community that is also in western part of Omaha. Would you like to look for land with us? And when we got the yes, a fun story related to that is the meeting that happened between some of the members of the synagogue and the Muslim community looking to establish a new community or congregation. They met at a public library as a kind of neutral ground. And they both brought food offerings because it's customary to be radically hospitable in both the Jewish and Muslim tradition. But I would like to say that I always learned that you weren't supposed to bring food into a public library, but they seem to ignore that piece. I think that's funny. And then as they sat and deepened their relationship with each other and got to know each other a little more, even in that setting, they learned that in Omaha, which is 500,000 people or more, that they both have fast days, but they use the same caterer in their families to host to break the fast. So, I think that reminds us, right, that you can choose every day in your life. Are you going to lean into what is similar about you or what is different? And we have come to learn that both are important. There are times in which our similarities bring us closer, but our differences allow us to move forward.
I think that's beautiful. And you mentioned the formation of these relationships at the time of 9/11. Sadly, the need for ongoing relations has not gone away.
Right.
As witnessed even recently.
Can you
this talk about that?
This week in particular, this 20 years of, and I'll add that, we decided if we were going to have Christian and Muslim partners, it would be in good faith for us to have some Christian partners to join us. That's been a little bit more complicated. And as we've grown and matured, we have come to believe that our work, especially post co-location, is to relate to people however they relate to religion. For some people, it's core to their identity. For other people, it's their trauma story. And that if we are advocating for freedom of thought and belief and the freedom to express our religious traditions in all of the beauty of their differences, that is inclusive of people beyond these three Abrahamic traditions, right? And I would say that Our relationship in Omaha with the Church of Latter-day Saints is a very important partnership. The dedication to community that our local stakes have, and to show up for and with us, to invite us in as individual communities and our collective to participate in days of service, especially during COVID, has really been an important relationship for us, and is part of our ability to mature and grow in this big tent mindset.
You served on the Board of Trustees for Temple Israel Synagogue for a decade, and that gives you a particular insight into one of these groups. But of course, your relationships, you have insight into all of them. Were there any worries or any reasons people thought why this might not be a good idea? Or will this take away from our own mission and our own work if we're doing this other interfaith connection?
Yeah. I think that what I'll say is autonomy matters. What we've learned is that it's important that we realize that each of these congregations, and I'll speak first from the lens of the congregation that I was a leader, as we moved to a new location, our first priority was making sure that we have a vibrant congregation to be able to sustain Reform Judaism in Omaha, Nebraska. And we need to honor mission number one, and that we need to honor that our faith partners, our founding faith partners and other faith partners have a similar objective, right? Vibrant congregation. And that each of the spiritual leaders and lay leaders who help to advance that goal have to wear that hat first. However, we believe that it is core to the principles of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam to love your neighbor, to be in relationship with your neighbor, and to honor that we do things sometimes the same and sometimes differently. There are people who are very comfortable with the many names of God. In Islam, they recite 99 names of God with intention. That's part of their culture and practice. In Christianity, there's a little less room for that. And how do we make space for someone to see their religious tradition through a multiplicity of lenses? We look at belief, behavior, belonging, becoming, and body, meaning that it's not only about theology, that we appreciate that people care about the belief structure, but we're looking for rituals in order to connect, then to community, that we're all seeking something bigger, but part of the what's bigger is the belonging part, and that people's religious identity shifts and changes over the scope of their lifespan. For me, I was born as the conservative movement of Judaism, but I chose the Reform denomination of Judaism as an adult. Many people marry and shift between religious identities. As the religious landscape is shifting, do my children want their grandmother's version of religion? That's all impacting our ability to be in relationship with each other. And so that's becoming part. And then body. How do other people look at you? If you wear a hijab, if you wear a head covering, what are the judgments that we make about people because of their color of their skin and whether or not they fit in or not in a community? And all of those things are part of how we relate to each other and to ourselves and to what is bigger than any of us.
I love this picture. And that mission number one, I'm picturing each congregation, whether it's for the Jumu'ah or Shabbat service or a Sunday church service. Is there something different in those services, knowing that you are in close community and proximity in a relationship with those other denominations or faiths?
The answer is a definite yes. And it's even further than you might realize, is that in this autonomy, we appreciate that we want to maintain the integrity of our separate identities, But we have to honor also that we might have a visitor or a guest who's in the house from one of our neighbors, and which is often the case. That if we have permeable walls and we are able to move between these four organizations with not only freedom but love, then it could be a regular occurrence where someone in the pews was not of that religious tradition. And there is an opportunity for what I call holy envy. And the question is not necessarily whether or not you are welcoming as the host. The question is, can you be a good guest?
And honor the tradition you were visiting.
And honor the tradition you're visiting, right?
Yeah, that's beautiful. What impact does that have, not just on the congregations, but the wider community? Can you assess that?
Yes. So we would say, especially in the last couple of years, as we've come to unpack racial reckoning and a rise of or privileging of one religious group perhaps over others, that it's important for us to appreciate that this conversation can not only happen between religious communities. This conversation about equity and inclusion is happening in for-profit, in nonprofit, in the faith communities. It's happening at university and seminary. And so if we intend to have that conversation across sectors, we decided we needed to be the convener. So we just hosted our second annual Race, Religion, and Social Justice Conference, and it is across those sectors. So we convened 500 people this last year to come and have a conversation about race, religion, and justice, and invite presenters from across the country to do the same. And it's fascinating to listen to not only people's difference in their understanding of religion and race depending on their sector, but how we invite conversations between those sectors. And from those create collaborations, right? Because everything we can do better together.
I would love to be in one of those meetings. I'm glad to know about the fact that happens. Is that an annual event?
It is June 5th and 6th of 2024. Mark your calendar.
All right. I'm planning on being around in June, so
That's great. Just a little fascinating side note about that. This year we received 65 submissions for breakout speakers. We were able to honor 24 spots, and it was a lot of information that we were able to provide. But of those, about a third of the requests to give a breakout speech was from the Muslim community. And something that I'd like to notice about that is the opportunity to raise the voices of the marginalized or underserved. And I'm saying that in a moment following incredible disruption in the Middle East. And yes. I'm a Jewish woman telling you that I think we need to uplift the voices of Muslims in the United States, right? Now, that means that I have 20 years of experience in being in relationship and close proximity to the Muslim community, and I have a very healthy curiosity about what is different and beautiful about that. And at the same time, I can say what is happening in the Middle East is messy and ugly, just the ugliest side of humanity. And that what we can do here in the United States, in Omaha, Nebraska, is to know our neighbors, to realize that I can go to a rally for the state of Israel, and my friend can go to a rally for the Palestinian people, and the next day we can join each other for lunch. And as a matter of fact, this weekend, all of these things happened. One of my closest friends in the mosque attended the rally for Palestine. I attended the rally for Israel. And we, on Saturday, went to lunch and we brought our moms to meet each other.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
Peace is possible. One relationship at a time, even in the middle of a global catastrophe.
And so helpful to not instantly polarize completely in a black and white way, all or nothing. Right. And as you recognize, the ugliest parts of humanity are brought out in conflicts like this. Right. It sounds to me like you're saying you have been changed over those 20 years. Can I ask about that personal effect You've just told us how that might affect a day-to-day relationship, but
Yeah.
your
So I
faith
would
as
say
well.
for me, Judaism is a couple of things that I think Judaism has to offer the world. We debate. We love to turn a conversation and not intend to agree at the end of the day. That's what the rabbis are famous for, right? And so that was just part of my childhood, is just get into it. Just be able to look at it from all sides, not wrong or right, just learning, just being curious. So that's something that I offer the experiment that we're doing. And at the same time, Judaism invites doubt, right? The word Israel means to wrestle with God, right? So I get to be public and say, you know what? I might not be the most observant Jew, but I appreciate my religiosity, and I might struggle with the word God. However, there's not a day that goes by that even in my own 58-year-old version of struggling with God, that I don't have an encounter that seems supernatural to me, that feels like, wow, if I felt that there was actually, a God that controlled the chess pieces here, she would choose for me to be having this conversation in this moment, and other people might be really comfortable calling this encounter God. And that has invited me to just get a little more comfortable with that, right? To look at that and say, like, okay, let go. Be open to what the next thing that comes, whether that's the challenge of COVID, as an example. We had a meeting of our board, our staff, and our clergy on March 10th of 2020. At that meeting, I was named executive director. They passed a strategic plan, and everyone in the room was exposed to COVID because we had patient 0 in Omaha, Nebraska in our room with us.
Oh, boy.
And we were scheduled to have an in-person event 6 days later that was canceled. And we pivoted, and we were supposed to have 400 people attend. We pivoted, and we had a virtual event 2 weeks later, and we had 1,006 people come from an international audience. These are intensely beautiful, powerful moments, right? That I don't know the why, but if I can just look for the silver lining in both the grief and the lamentation of our work, and in these sparks that are divine.
Here's a two-part question. Mm-hmm. Are people surprised to find out that Omaha, Nebraska is where this is happening? Because I think from outside, we may think this is not where people are forced to rub shoulders or jostle up against each other like in a New York subway or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And yet this seems to be the very place it's happening.
So let's call it the heartland.
Okay.
As opposed to the flyover zone. And, I think a lot of is possible in Nebraska, and particularly Omaha. Omaha is very generous. We have an incredible philanthropic community. And I believe it's a place, especially for bricks and mortar, where if you dream it, you can find the people who will believe in it with you. At the same time, I'm not sure if you know this, but the demographics of Nebraska mirror the United States. We have the urban-rural divide, we have the red-blue divide, we have the identity demographics that almost exactly mirror the rest of the United States. And so a piece of hope that I would give to your listeners is, if this work that we're doing in Omaha, Nebraska, if we can understand what the magic of it happening to bridge difference is, it's replicable and scalable.
Yeah. Hearing that demographic information you just gave, that does sound like if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere.
Yes,
What
sir.
what do you advise people who say, how do we do this?
Mm-hmm. A couple of things. First is start with trust. I think most people talk about earning trust. And I invite people to open their heart with compassion to say, I believe in the humanity of our ability to come together. And we have to start there with that open heart. Then we need to have autonomy. And I discussed that already. The importance of valuing what is different about us as beautiful and something to celebrate. That there are multiple paths. That if this God that everyone globally has such admiration for is actually as magnificent as is told in our sacred books, then that God doesn't know the human limitations that we put on that word. So let's just open ourselves to the magnitude of celebrating what is different about us and give us room to be autonomous in our relationship to each other and to what is bigger than all of us. And then to understand it's messy. It's gonna be messy.
And just know that.
People are messy. Institutions are messy. And faith traditions can be beautiful in the mess, right? And individuals can be broken. We are all carrying more than we have the ability to carry right this minute, especially this week. How do we greet each other with grace and mercy in order to be in this messy relationship that is our life? And finally, to not reduce any person or religion. Religion is not a monolith. I am speaking to you as a woman, as a mother, as a gardener, as a yogi, and also as a nonprofit leader and as a Jewish person, right? And on different days, I prioritize different parts of my identity, right? And let's make room for that. Let's appreciate that we're all going to relate to religion differently and that that's okay. And it's part of the beauty of the spectrum of understanding life.
Besides these three I just want to pause and say amen.
Yes.
But besides a mosque, a synagogue, and a church, we mentioned an interfaith center. Is that a separate building?
It is. So it is a fourth building and a fourth partner in this project. And our work for the fourth entity, the Tri-Faith Initiative, which is its own 501c3 and has a Tri-Faith Center, which is its own building. We call the four buildings together the Tri-Faith Commons. Our work is obviously this first project of co-location to foster interfaith relationships and understanding at 132nd Street in Omaha, Nebraska. But about 60% of the people who participate in our work or support us financially are not a member of one of those three congregations. As I mentioned, our influence is national for certain and global at best. And there is an opportunity for every single person who is on this call to be part of the work that we are doing. Everyone, regardless of your religion or none, have a place in our work in advocating for the advancement of interfaith relationships and understanding. We all desperately need in this time of conflict to see and hear and know each other. And we are modeling that, and we want everyone to feel that there is a place and a space for them.
Is there a website for the Tri-Faith Center?
Yes.
For the Interfaith Center?
So our website is trifaith.org. And I invite you to subscribe to our newsletter and follow us, to join us, as I said, at our conference, and to realize that particularly in this time of division and strife, to know that if I'm asking anything of you, yes, I'd love you to follow us. I'd love you to come to our programs. But more than anything, I need you not to be a bystander at the rise of religious intolerance and hate. When you see anti-Semitism or Islamophobia or bigotry to the Black church or the Native American experience or all of the other isms that are out there that are the message of hate, I ask you to stand up, to report. If you see something, say something, and to believe that hate does not have a place, especially among those who are faithful.
That's difficult for people to do because they're uncertain how they'll be received, which to me is I suppose, a natural reaction to fear over faith. But if people choose not to fear or to act in the face of fear, which would be the very definition of courage, do you have examples of times where people have stood up in a difficult situation and effected change?
That's such a lovely question. I guess I'm just going to use myself as an example because I think it's always good to use I statements. This week, I have been called upon to walk between more than one community. And I struggle with the questions of where those lines are between standing with my community and my affinity group and standing with humanity. And will we find the bravery to be accountable for all of humanity? And I say that because it's easier for us to lean into those similarities and see the pain as Jewish people for those suffering in the state of Israel at the hand of Hamas, for sure. That is something easy to condemn. It's egregious. It's disgusting, right? And how do we, with compassion, look at the situation in Israel for the Palestinian people? And how do we open ourselves to say, what are the situations and the realities, the systems and structures that got us to this place? And if we could get a redo, what would we have redone? And if we don't get a redo, what can we do now? I am so grateful that I have friends who are willing to say to me this week, how do I send humanitarian aid to the people in Gaza? Right? We have to learn how to walk between and hold more than one truth, right? In order to see us all as created in the image of God.
You mentioned that, created in the image of God, right out of Genesis, and seeing the sacredness or holiness in others. My next question, maybe you've just answered this, was, do you see in each of these different services and congregations maybe ears perk up a little on those scripture readings, whether from the Torah or the Quran, Old and New Testament, when those types of phrases come up? I wonder if people light up a little with them instead of just letting it pass over them like this phrase we've heard all our lives.
I've heard multiple people over the 20 years be able to say, I can pray in more spaces than I could before, that, I can be Jewish and find sacred in sitting in the church. For me, the theology lands less gently on me than the behavior part. So I can find holy envy in particular when I watch my Christian friends take communion, like for just understanding what that means they are accepting in their lives. I just have some holy envy for. I'm not looking to add a different religious tradition. I'm happy with the one that I have, but I still can look at my partners and friends and have and see awe and wonder, right? And probably the most magnificent experience that I have is witnessing a woman at the mosque wash in preparation for prayer, and then to hold her hands out to accept and submit. Not easy things for me. Accept and submit, I'm a strong woman in 2023. Like I have a hard time with that. And then I can talk to a friend about her choice to wear a hijab and to keep the intimacy of her hair, which is a very intimate thing, right? To keep that between her and her husband. Like if that's her choice, I think that's beautiful. Not for me, for her. And so those are the places that I don't know that it's the scripture that calls it to me, but when I see people who experience in all of its fullness awe and wonder and choose acts in their lives with intention to appreciate that, I think, as you said, amen.
Here's a little off to the side sidebar question. Perhaps this will make it in, but I'm curious as a yoga teacher, and I ask this as the father of a yoga teacher and sometime participant with not with great skill, but great enthusiasm and openness. There's another millennia-old tradition, similar in a length of existence as Judaism. You're blending other wisdom as well. Do you have comments on that, or what that brings to your life?
I mean, I did yoga teacher training. I am 500-hour yoga teacher certified, and that practice, that commitment that I made to movement and breath brought me closer to the religious traditions of my forefathers in the Jewish tradition. And I constantly drew threads that I was able to share with my classmates as I went through that training. And I think that's true for all of us in everything that we do, that we have a choice to bridge those parts and pieces of our identity. And, yoga for me, sometimes, and if anyone who is listening happens to be clergy or staff of a trying to create a religious experience for people, I as a person who was involved as a lay leader and on staff at the synagogue, I feel like I constantly was worrying about how the sausage was made. Was the microphone working? Were they going in order? Was the agenda done? Is that the way I wanted them to read that prayer? Why isn't this person here who I thought should be here? And that practice of being able to be spiritual in the moment, I practice on the mat, right? How do I calm my intention on the mat to witness what is and let it go, name it and let it go? And how do I learn how to do that when I'm at Shabbat services, right? It's really good practice. So, life is just a series of experiments.
Well, I'm hearing yoga, I'm hearing hints of Buddhist practice. And I myself would have to say that when I hear to concentrate on the breath, and that it comes to my mind, breathing the breath of life into us as when we become the beings that we are. I'd like to read a quote from an interview from religionnews.com. They're quoting you, and you can tell me how accurate this is, but it says, religious pluralism is celebrated when people of diverse religious communities and worldviews defend each other's right to thrive and maintain distinct identities while engaging in beneficial ways. This is not just a nice idea, it is critical to the health of our democracy. So this isn't just faith. This is the very society that we live in. You are having an effect on, a positive effect. So thank you.
You're welcome. I think it's probably the most important thing to appreciate, celebrate, and support for the future of our democracy.
Wendy Goldberg, thank you for speaking with me today in good faith.
Thank you for having me.